There's another article that you wrote I thought was really interesting. It's about the crisis of males, and you kind of looked at
Hmm.
all the data that relates to the loneliness crisis, sexlessness, friendlessness in males, and I mean this was not talked about maybe 10 years ago. Now it's quite
Hmm.
talked about, especially on the right.
Yeah.
I wonder what you found. I mean, I have a whole list here. Maybe we could go through a few of these because obviously,
Hmm.
I don't know if you have the data to hand, but maybe you remember.
Hmm.
You have the feeling that some of this may be a little bit overstated because it's not really borne
I think
out by
it's
the data.
completely overstated.
Okay.
So it is true that men do seem to be underperforming in certain markers. If you compare them to like, the men who were born in generations past. But the problem, okay, so the problem I don't have is, with the fact that contemporary men are underachieving. The problem I have with the narrative is that they try to, focus on men specifically when really, if you look at both sexes, both of them seem to have be having problems in the modern day. So it is true that the difference in economic status between men and women is closing, because of, gender norms and whatnot. They're shifting over time. But the problem is that that doesn't seem to be translating to psychological differences. So it is true that young men commit suicide about four times the rate that young women do. Um, but the problem is that I think that relates to like psychological differences, like just innate ones. Yes, innate ones. Um, and if you look at over the difference over time, the sex differences in suicide seem to be closing, which is a little alarming, actually, because it's being driven by young women committing suicide more than their generational peers in the past. And it isn't true about Germany, though. So in some countries, it is true that the sex difference in suicide is closing within the younger generation, but it isn't true about Germany specifically, and I don't know why that's the case. It's a little odd. And so there's also the depression data. So it is true that teenagers seem to be getting increasingly more depressed. Like Jonathan Haidt has good work on this. But the young men and young women seem to be increasing in depression at either the same rate or uh, what you actually find more often is that the young women are getting depressed faster than young men, which is kind of incompatible with this whole male struggle narrative. Really, what the narrative should be is that uh, people are kind of becoming more depressed and anxious in the younger generation. And that's true for both men and women.
And I think yeah, a lot of the narrative seems to be that things have feminized. Entire society is kind of now catering to women,
Hmm.
and that has come at the exclusion of men who are not catered to, I guess, or not. Education is not customized for them.
Hmm.
Job environments are not customized for them. Is there any data that supports this, or what does it
Um,
look like?
it is true that men used to go to college more often than women, but I think that had to do with gender norms. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't looked too deeply into whether, why economic status has closed between men and women, but I think it's just due to the shifts in gender norms that has occurred. Um, if you want to talk about education specifically, it is true that in most countries, women attain more educational. They score higher in educational attainment than men. But it's also true that they get like lower quality degrees, so they're more likely to get them in something like art history than something like computer science, for example. So it's kind of hard to measure the gender difference in educational attainment. Um, for what it's worth, these differences in what majors men and women choose have been pretty stagnant since like the 70s or 80s. Um, the other thing is that the gender difference in other indicators of economic status have closed, such as income and wealth. They obviously still exist. Like, of course, men still earn more money than women. Um, I'm personally kind of skeptical that educational institutions are discriminatory towards men, or that they kind of force men down. And that's simply because the other indicators of economic status have started to close as well.
See, I think there was another point here that you made about kind of the masculinity and femininity.
Mhm.
Is there actually hard data of this, or just you just notice your environment and you see things
Um,
converging there as well?
well, there's the noticing aspect. Like it's very difficult to deny that contemporary men, like the Generation Z men, they're obviously less masculine than their generational peers. Just anecdotally speaking, like there's the whole femboy craze. There's the not so feminine men that I don't want to talk about. There is some data on this, but it's just cross sectional. So it's true that if you look at older men, they'll say they're more masculine than the younger men. But you can't really know if that's like an age difference or a generation difference, but it's probably a generation difference. One thing I wanted to specify was that in certain countries like Poland, this decline is not as apparent. Um, so I know there's this whole Polish femboy stereotype on the internet. But
Is
for
there?
what it's worth, Polish men seem to consider themselves fairly masculine. It's really the American and German men who don't consider themselves masculine. Just a little funny thing to add.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about the Polish femboy stereotype.
I don't know why I brought that up.
No, but it's good. It's good. You know, the more you know. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's pretty obvious. I think it's also kind of a bit, you know, what exactly? How do you operationalize masculinity and femininity? I remember I was
Hmm.
reading some, kind of this relatively manosphere website, and it was encouraging, like, how to be more masculine. It was kind of a list of things to buy and leather jackets, and consider buying a motorcycle, and it was all essentially an act of consumption that was presented to you, and if you consume the right products, then you will be masculine. And I don't know, it just felt like, just buy this costume and then you'll be masculine. I think it's really tough, and I think that's there's a lot of work for young men to actually figure this out for themselves. I don't think many generations in the past had to do that, because there was kind
Hmm.
of an implied social polarity between the sexes. There were social scripts that were obvious, and now, like you said, things are converging to a middle, and people don't really know exactly where to place themselves, so it's not surprising to me that they're flailing a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't seem to be like as apocalyptic as it sounds often.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Um,
yeah.
I do agree that it's kind of hard to measure masculinity. Because if you take a guy who likes to smoke cigars or wears a beard or likes to have sex with a lot of different women, sort of superficially he might seem very masculine, but if I feel like if you try hard to be masculine, that's almost like to a point not masculine. I think
Yeah.
the whole like Kate cigar, sports car, prostitute thing is just kind of fake and maybe not so straight. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I think it's, the whole phenomenon of the male to male transgender and female to female transgender, like people really trying to, morph themselves into these kind of caricatures of what it means to be female and
Yeah,
male.
as a caricature.
I see a lot of that, in kind of trad discourse as well. Okay, the roles of the patriarch and stuff, but it's actually just, some guy with like very low grip strength from Arkansas, really trying hard to, get his girlfriend into a sundress, and things don't always pan out the way you want to. And in regards to, I don't know, whatever biblical marriage or things that, people really like to consume online. So yeah, it's I don't know. I think we're in for a very rough ride, as far as I can see. And kind of the evolution of these ideologies online is quite startling to me. About 3 years
Mm.
ago, I felt that this was like the place where all the intelligent people congregate to talk about things that one does not talk about in other places, and I think that's still the case in many ways, but um, many info hazards, many info hazards, and yeah, I think people are. I don't think they're equipped to handle. the amount of information, the intensity, and also the incentive that, there is a huge incentive to just put your most lurid fantasies about, whatever tribe, like opposite tribe conflict you have on the internet for, brownie points. And I don't know if that's a good thing for your, mental health, just talking about mental health.